"Mom, maybe you should sit somewhere else. This table's for important people." Those words came from my own daughter's mouth. The restaurant went silent for a heartbeat before laughter erupted around the table. My son Michael chuckled awkwardly. My son-in-law Rob smirked, and even my teenage grandchildren joined in as if my humiliation were part of the evening's entertainment. In that moment, sitting under the golden light of the silver lantern's chandeliers, I felt something inside me crack. 30 years of love, sacrifice, and quiet patience turned to dust. It was as if someone had pulled the floor from under me, and I was falling through decades of memories, birthday parties, college tuitions, tearful phone calls, all of them paid for, all of them forgotten. I had never felt so small, so invisible, so unnecessary in my own family. Tell me, have you ever given everything to the people you love, only to realize they stopped seeing you as a person? If you've been there, leave a comment telling me your age or where you're from. I'd love to know I'm not alone. And if you think I'm overreacting, just like this video and stay tuned, because what happened next changed my life forever. My name is Maggie Whitmore. I'm 67 years old, and I spent most of my life being the dependable one, the professor, the widow, the mother who always said yes. Tonight, in a Boston restaurant filled with expensive laughter and fine crystal, I decided to do something I had never done before. I said no. And that single word, quiet, trembling, but firm, would become the beginning of the most important lesson of my life. The laughter still echoed in my head long after I left the silver lantern that night. It followed me like a cruel melody I could not turn off. Every clink of silverware and soft murmur from other tables had burned into my memory, but nothing cut deeper than her voice. "Mom, maybe you should sit somewhere else. This table's for important people." I never thought words could physically hurt, but they did. They hit me in the chest like a silent punch, one that knocked the air out of me while I smiled to save face. Around us, people turned to look. Some gave sympathetic glances, others smirked. It was a fancy restaurant in the heart of Boston, full of people who looked like they belonged. And suddenly, I was sure that I did not. Vanessa, my adopted daughter, sat tall and flawless across the table, her perfect hair catching the light. Rob, her husband, poured more wine into her glass without a second thought. My son Michael scrolled through his phone, pretending not to notice the tension, and my 2 teenage grandchildren whispered to each other, hiding smiles. For a moment, I wondered if anyone in that room could see what was really happening, a mother being reduced to a joke. I told myself to stay calm. Dignity first. Always dignity. That had been my rule since my days teaching at Harvard. But inside, I was trembling. I watched Vanessa laugh and wave at someone across the room, her gold bracelet flashing as she moved. I remembered the day I bought her that bracelet for her 21st birthday, the way she had cried and hugged me, saying I was the mother she had always dreamed of. That memory now felt like it belonged to another lifetime. When the waiter arrived with the menus, Vanessa didn't even glance my way. She ordered for the table, picking the most expensive dishes without hesitation. "Mom loves seafood," she said with a smirk, "so let's get the lobster. It's her treat anyway." Her treat. That was how she saw me, not as family, but as a wallet with a heartbeat. I nodded weakly, afraid my voice would crack if I spoke. The rest of the meal passed in a blur of laughter and wine. They talked about their trips to New York, their business plans, their new golf lessons. No one asked about my paintings, or the small art show I had hosted last week, something that had taken me months to prepare. It was as if my life outside of them didn't exist. Halfway through dessert, I tried to join the conversation. "My art students loved the new exhibit," I said softly. "Mom," Vanessa interrupted, waving her spoon dismissively. "Let's not talk about boring stuff. Rob, tell us again about that investment deal." They all laughed again. My heart sank. When the bill came, the waiter set the black folder in front of me. "For you, ma'am." I frowned. There must be a mistake. Vanessa tilted her head, feigning innocence. "Oh, didn't I mention? You're covering tonight. It's a celebration." I stared at her, unable to find words. "Vanessa, I already helped with your boutique. That was supposed to be the celebration." Her tone turned sharp. "Come on, Mom, don't be dramatic, it's just dinner." Michael chimed in with a dry laugh. "Yeah, Mom, it's not a big deal. You know how Vanessa is." "Yes," I said quietly. "I do." The waiter hovered uncertainly beside me, waiting. The total glared up at me, nearly $1,800. My hands shook slightly as I closed the folder. "No," I said finally. "I'm not paying for this." The table froze. For a long second, no one spoke. Then Vanessa leaned forward, her smile gone. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," I said, steadying my voice. "You invited me here, you humiliated me, and now you expect me to pay for it. I won't." "Maggie," Rob said, his tone somewhere between shock and annoyance. "You're making a scene." I let out a quiet laugh. "A scene?" This was a scene long before I opened my mouth. Michael rolled his eyes. "Always the drama." That one stung more than I expected. Always the drama. It was what they said when I cried after Charles died, when I got emotional during holidays, when I tried to express how lonely it was being their afterthought. My chair scraped against the floor as I stood. "Enjoy your dinner," I said. "I'll pay for my meal and leave." The waiter nodded awkwardly, grateful for the clarity. Vanessa's voice rose behind me. "You'll regret this, Mom." I turned back and looked at her, really looked at her. The woman sitting there was not the scared 8-year-old girl I had adopted from the foster system. That little girl used to cling to my arm and whisper that she never wanted to be left alone again. This woman, polished and cold, was a stranger. "No," I said softly. "For the first time, I don't think I will." It was Aber. As I stepped outside, the air hit me like a wave of freedom and pain all at once. The city lights shimmered on the wet pavement after a light rain. I walked slowly, each step heavy, my heels echoing against the sidewalk. I thought of all the times I had opened my checkbook for her private schools, designer clothes, tuition, wedding expenses, business loans. Every time I told myself it was love. Every time I told myself she would appreciate it someday. But love without respect isn't love. It's servitude. The thought made me stop right there under a flickering streetlight. For the first time, I said it out loud. I deserve better. 80. A couple walking by glanced at me, probably assuming I was talking on the phone. I smiled faintly to myself. Maybe I was talking to the woman I used to be, the one who thought kindness meant surrender. My phone buzzed with a message from Vanessa. I didn't open it. Instead, I slipped it into my purse and kept walking. When I reached the corner, I saw a familiar silver sedan waiting Eleanor Campbell's car. My oldest friend. She rolled down the window, her hair a perfect silver halo under the streetlight. "Get in, Maggie," she said softly. I hesitated for a second. My pride was still raw. My heart was aching, but her voice was calm and warm, like it had always been. Inside her car, everything smelled faintly of leather and perfume. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was heavy with understanding. Eleanor finally spoke. "You did the right thing." "Did I?" I asked. "Because right now it just feels like I lost my family." "You didn't lose them," she said gently. "You just stopped paying rent for their love." Her words hit me harder than I wanted to admit. I turned to the window and watched the city lights fade as we drove away. Somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispered that this wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning of something new. I just didn't know yet how far that beginning would go or what kind of test was waiting for me next. The next morning, the sunlight slipped through the blinds like an unwanted reminder that life had to continue. My head was pounding. I had barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Vanessa's voice echoing, sharp and dismissive. "You'll regret this, Mom." I made myself a cup of coffee and sat by the kitchen window, staring at the frost on the glass. Boston winters have a way of amplifying silence. The house felt emptier than ever. Charles's old chair stood by the fireplace, untouched for years, and for the first time in decades, I wondered what he would say if he could see what our family had become. By noon, my phone buzzed with messages, dozens of them. Vanessa's angry texts filled the screen, accusations, guilt trips, even a few tearful apologies that I knew were only meant to soften me. Then came one from Michael, short and cold. "We need to talk," but I ignored them all. For the first time, I didn't owe anyone an explanation. Later that afternoon, Eleanor called. "I'm downstairs," she said. She didn't ask. She never needed to. I put on my coat and joined her in her car. The moment I saw her, I noticed how pale she looked. The sharpness in her eyes was still there, but her skin had lost its color. "Are you all right?" I asked. She gave a soft laugh. That's a complicated question. We drove in silence to a small cafe near the harbor. It was quiet, with only a few customers reading newspapers and sipping coffee, the kind of place where heavy conversations happen behind gentle music. Eleanor ordered tea. I had another coffee, though I didn't need it. When the drinks came, she placed her hand over mine. "Maggie," she said, "I've been meaning to tell you something important." I braced myself. Her tone carried weight. "I'm sick," she said simply. "Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The world seemed to tilt. I froze, unable to breathe. "No," I whispered. She nodded, calm and matter-of-fact, like she was discussing the weather. "I've known for 3 months. The doctors gave me less than a year." I felt tears sting my eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I needed to get my affairs in order first," she said, "and because there's something I want to do before I go." She reached into her purse and pulled out a thick envelope. Inside were legal documents stamped with the seal of a law firm. "What is this?" "My will," she said. "And a test." I blinked. "A test?" Eleanor leaned forward. "Maggie, I've watched the way your children treat you. I've watched you give and give until there's nothing left for yourself. That ends now. This test is your chance to take your life back." She slid the papers toward me. "I'm leaving you my entire estate, but there's a condition. For 6 months, you can't give your children a single cent. No loans, no gifts, no bailouts. If you hold your ground, you'll inherit everything. If you give in, it all goes to charity." I stared at her. "Eleanor, this is insane." "No," she said firmly. "This is mercy. It's not about the money, Maggie. It's about you remembering that your worth isn't measured by what you give away." I sat back, speechless. "You once helped me rebuild my husband's company when I was lost," she continued. "Now I'm helping you rebuild yourself." I swallowed hard. "And if they find out? They'll fight you, manipulate you, maybe even hate you for a while," she said. "But if they ever loved you at all, this will force them to remember why." I didn't know whether to thank her or cry, maybe both. That night, I lay awake thinking about her words, about my children, about myself. I knew she was right. I had bought peace for so long that I'd forgotten how to earn respect. The next morning, the storm arrived. Vanessa showed up first, bursting through the door without knocking. Her designer coat dripped melted snow on my rug. "We need to talk," she said sharply. "Good morning to you too," I replied. "Don't play games, Mom," she snapped. "You embarrassed me last night. Do you have any idea how that looked?" "I know exactly how it looked," I said quietly. "Like a mother finally setting boundaries." She blinked, taken aback. "Boundaries? You're my mother. You're supposed to help me." "I've helped you more than enough, Vanessa. The boutique, your apartment, your wedding, all of it. No more." Her voice rose. "You can't just cut me off." "Yes, I can," I said. "And I am." At that moment, Michael walked in, his expression tense. "Okay, what's going on here?" "Ask Mom," Vanessa said bitterly. "She's decided she's done being a parent." Michael turned to me. "Mom, you're upset. Let's talk this through." "I'm perfectly calm," I said. "And I'm serious. There will be no more money, not for either of you." The silence that followed was suffocating. Michael frowned. "This is about that dinner, isn't it? You're overreacting." I let out a shaky laugh. "Overreacting? You both humiliated me. You treat me like a bank, not a mother. That ends today." Rob, who had been standing awkwardly near the door, finally spoke. "Come on, Maggie. Don't make this bigger than it is." I turned to him. "It's already bigger than you realize." Vanessa slammed her purse on the table. "You're unbelievable. After everything we've done for you." "For me?" I interrupted. "What have you done for me, Vanessa?" She froze, lips trembling. Michael sighed. "Mom, you're not yourself. You're acting crazy." I straightened my shoulders. "Maybe this is the first time in years that I am myself." They stared at me like they were seeing a stranger. And maybe they were. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "You'll regret this, Mom. When you need us, don't expect us to be there." I took a deep breath. "If that's the price of respect, I'll pay it." She turned on her heel and stormed out. Rob followed, shaking his head. Michael hesitated by the door, his expression softer but still disappointed. "This isn't you, Mom," he said. "You're wrong," I whispered. It finally is. When the door closed, the silence returned, thicker than before. I sat on the couch, staring at my trembling hands. The tears came then, slow and quiet, like rain after a long drought. My phone buzzed again. This time, I didn't ignore it. I picked it up, opened the video app, and spoke to the camera with a shaky smile. "Tell me," I said softly, "have you ever given everything to your children, only to feel invisible to them? Have you ever loved so much that you forgot who you were?" I paused, breathing deeply. "If you have, leave a comment. Tell me your age, or where you're from. Let's see how many of us there are, the mothers, the fathers, the people who gave too much. And if you think I'm wrong for saying no, then like this video instead. Because either way, you're part of the story." I ended the recording and set my phone aside. My heart was pounding, but there was a strange peace inside me. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of their anger. Eleanor had given me more than a challenge. She had given me permission to choose myself. And though I didn't know it yet, that single choice would change everything for me, for Vanessa, and for the rest of our family. The house was too quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your ears until you start hearing your own heartbeat. A day had passed since Vanessa and Michael stormed out of my living room, and still, I could feel their anger lingering in the air, like smoke after a fire. I sat at the kitchen table, my coffee gone cold, my phone lying face down beside it. It had been buzzing on and off since morning. I didn't have to look to know who it was. Vanessa's messages always came in bursts, long paragraphs of rage, then sudden apologies, then rage again. It was her pattern, a storm she didn't know how to control. Michael's tone was colder, his words shorter, but they cut deeper. "We need to talk. This isn't like you. Stop letting Eleanor manipulate you." I almost laughed at that. Eleanor was the only person who wasn't manipulating me. I picked up the phone, read a few more messages, then finally turned it off completely. The silence that followed was instant, almost shocking. It felt like stepping into clean air after breathing smoke for too long. Outside, snow had started to fall again, blanketing the yard in white. I watched it gather on the bare branches of the old oak tree Charles and I had planted the year Michael was born. The memories came in waves: Christmas mornings, backyard barbecues, Vanessa's laughter when she was little, before money and pride hardened her heart. I whispered to myself, where did I lose them? The next few days were strange. No calls, no visits, no footsteps in the hallway. The absence of noise was both terrifying and comforting. For the first time in years, no one needed me. I began to rediscover the small rituals I had forgotten. I painted in the mornings, letting colors spill across the canvas without worrying about dinner plans or transfer requests. I took long walks through Beacon Hill, wrapped in my thick coat, watching families pass by. I smiled at children pulling sleds and dogs chasing after snowballs. But even in those moments, guilt followed me like a shadow. Every time I saw a mother with her daughter, laughter echoing in the cold air, I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake. One evening, as I was finishing a watercolor of the Charles River, the phone rang again. The sound startled me after so many days of quiet. I hesitated before answering. "Mom," Michael's voice said, low and measured. "We need to fix this." "There's nothing to fix," I said gently. "I just set a boundary." He sighed. "You've never been like this before. You're shutting everyone out. Vanessa's losing her mind. She's angry because she lost her control, not her mother." "That's unfair," he said. "You know she's struggling. And whose fault is that?" "She's 38, Michael. She has every opportunity to make her life work. I can't keep saving her from herself." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Eleanor's putting ideas in your head. This isn't you." I closed my eyes. "Maybe you don't know me as well as you think." The silence stretched between us. "Finally," he said, "I just hope you realize what you're doing before it's too late." Then the line went dead. I sat there, the receiver heavy in my hand, until the dial tone disappeared. Later that night, I called Eleanor. She answered on the second ring. "Rough day?" she asked immediately. "You could say that," I said, trying to sound lighter than I felt. "They think I've gone crazy." End quote. Eleanor chuckled softly. "Good. That means you're finally making sense." "I feel guilty," I admitted. "They're my children." "They're adults," she corrected. "You're not punishing them, Maggie. You're teaching them. There's a difference." Her voice was calm, reassuring, like a steady hand guiding me through fog. The next morning, I woke up to find an envelope slipped under my door. My heart sank when I saw Vanessa's handwriting. The letter was long, dramatic, full of anger and sorrow. She accused me of abandoning her, of choosing Eleanor over her own blood. She ended with a single line that broke me. "You taught me everything except how to live without your money." I set the letter down, tears blurring the words. Maybe she was right. Maybe I had created this version of her. I walked to the fireplace and stood there for a long time, staring at the flames. They reminded me of her bright, restless, beautiful, dangerous. That night, I dreamed of the past. Vanessa at 8 years old, holding my hand tightly at the adoption center, her eyes wide with fear and hope. Michael as a teenager, trying to act brave after his father's funeral, but his lip trembling when he thought I wasn't looking. They had both been so fragile once, and somehow, in trying to protect them, I had turned fragility into entitlement. When I woke up, the world outside was silent again. Snow covered everything, even the garden fence. It was peaceful, but heavy too, like a clean slate that demanded I fill it carefully. I spent the day sorting through old photos. I found one of Vanessa at her high school graduation. She was radiant, proud, and smiling with her diploma in hand. I was standing beside her, looking at her the same way I had looked at her that night at the restaurant. Only then, my heart was full of pride, not pain. I traced her face with my fingertip and whispered, "Please find your way back." In the evening, the phone rang again. But this time, it wasn't Vanessa or Michael. It was the local art gallery. "Mrs. Whitmore," the curator said, "we loved your last exhibit. Would you consider hosting another show in the spring?" For a moment, I didn't know what to say. It had been years since someone wanted something from me that wasn't money. "Yes," I said finally, my voice trembling a little. "I'd love that." When I hung up, I realized something had shifted. For the first time in a long while, I had something of my own to look forward to. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window, watching the snowflakes dance under the streetlight. My reflection in the glass looked softer, somehow older. Yes, but also stronger. As I lifted the glass, I whispered a quiet toast to the empty room. To peace. To boundaries. To second chances. My phone vibrated again. A message this time, from Eleanor. "How are you holding up, Maggie?" I typed back. "Learning how to breathe again," she replied almost instantly. "Good. Keep breathing. The hard part isn't over yet." I smiled, setting the phone down. I didn't know what she meant then, but I would soon enough. Something told me this calm wouldn't last long. The silence before the next storm had already begun. The knock came earlier than I expected. Sharp, impatient, the kind of knock that carried anger instead of courtesy. I looked at the clock barely past 10 in the morning. Outside, snow was melting on the front porch, turning the steps into small rivers of gray water. When I opened the door, Vanessa stood there, flawless as ever, her coat perfectly buttoned, her lips tight. Behind her was Michael, wearing the same expression he had worn since childhood when he wanted to reason with me, but had already chosen a side. "Good morning," I said, though it didn't feel like one. Vanessa walked in without waiting to be invited. Michael followed quietly, closing the door behind him. "Mom," she started, her tone clipped. "We need to talk. This has gone too far." I motioned toward the living room. "Then let's sit." The air was thick with tension. My paintings lined the walls, soft landscapes, quiet rivers, fields of lavender, but nothing in the room felt peaceful. Vanessa sat on the edge of the couch, her posture rigid. Michael stood behind her, arms crossed. She began almost immediately. "You humiliated me, Mom, at that restaurant, in front of my husband, in front of my children. You walked out and made me look like an idiot." I met her gaze, calmly. "No, Vanessa, I didn't humiliate you. You did that yourself." Her jaw tightened. "You think you're some kind of victim, don't you? You're making yourself the martyr in your own story." "I'm not the martyr," I said softly. "I'm the mother who finally said no." Michael stepped forward. "Mom, can we not turn this into another fight? We came here to have a civil conversation." "Then speak civilly," I replied. He sighed. "Look, I get it. You're hurt. Vanessa said things she shouldn't have. But we're family. We work through things. We don't freeze each other out." "That's what I thought too," I said, until I realized I'm the only one who's been working. Vanessa gave a short, bitter laugh. Oh, please. You're acting like you've been mistreated. You gave us everything, Mom. We never asked for that much. You asked every time you needed to be rescued, I said, my voice sharper now. Tuition, weddings, houses, the boutique, it was always something. It's called helping your children. She shot back. No, I said. It's called enabling. Her eyes flashed. So what, you're cutting us off completely? Just like that? Yes, I said simply. Michael frowned. Mom, this isn't like you. You've always been the generous one. I'm still generous, I said, just not with people who mistake it for obligation. For a moment, no one spoke. The clock on the mantel ticked, steady and loud. Then Vanessa leaned forward. What is this really about? Is Eleanor behind this? Is she manipulating you with her money and her fancy ideas about boundaries? Her words stung, not because they were true, but because I knew she believed them. Eleanor has nothing to do with this, I said, though the truth was more complicated than that. This is about me finally learning the difference between love and control. Michael's tone softened slightly. Mom, we're worried about you. You've been alone too much lately. You're making decisions out of anger. Worried about me? I asked. Or worried that the money's gone? That hit harder than I meant it to. Michael's face fell. Vanessa looked away. The silence was answer enough. I stood and walked toward the window. Outside, the snow had stopped, leaving the world wet and still. I could see the reflection of my children in the glass, the same faces I had once kissed goodnight, now strangers standing in my living room. When your father died, I said quietly, I promised myself I would hold this family together no matter what. I thought money could fix everything. I was wrong. All it did was buy temporary peace. Vanessa's voice trembled with anger. So now you're punishing us? No, I said. I'm saving what's left of myself. She stood abruptly. You know what, Mom? Maybe you're right. Maybe we're just terrible children. But don't come crying to us when you realize you pushed us away. It's not succeeded. I didn't push you away, I said. I just stopped letting you pull me apart. Her eyes filled with tears, but she turned before I could see them fall. Let's go, she told Michael. He hesitated. Mom, he said softly, this isn't over. No, I replied. It's just beginning. When they left, the sound of the door closing echoed through the house. I stood in the quiet for a long time, my hands trembling. It had been easier to face their anger than to face what came after the loneliness that settled in once the adrenaline faded. I made tea and sat on the couch, staring at the untouched slice of pie I had baked the day before, just in case they came peacefully. The pie sat there like a symbol of all my misplaced hope. An hour later, I heard another knock. Softer this time. When I opened the door, Eleanor stood there, wrapped in her thick gray coat, her breath visible in the cold. I thought you might need some company, she said, stepping inside. I just had a visit, I murmured. Let me guess, she said, hanging her coat. It didn't go well. I managed a small smile. You could say that. She sat beside me on the couch, her eyes gentle. You did the right thing. Then why does it feel so wrong? I asked. Because you love them, she said. And because love always hurts more when you finally set it free. We sat in silence for a while. The clock ticked again, the same rhythm that had filled the room during the argument. But now it sounded different, softer somehow, like the house itself was exhaling after holding its breath too long. Eleanor reached over and squeezed my hand. This is just the first battle, Maggie. The real test hasn't even started. I looked at her, confusion flickering in my eyes. What do you mean? She smiled faintly, almost sadly. You'll see soon enough. Outside, the clouds thickened again, and snow began to fall for the second time that day, slower this time, deliberate, as if the world itself was warning me to brace for what was coming next. The first call came on a Wednesday morning. I was rinsing paintbrushes in the sink when the phone rang, and for a split second, I considered ignoring it. Lately, every unexpected call carried a hint of dread. Mrs. Whitmore, a woman's voice said, this is Nurse Peterson from Brookside High. I'm calling about your granddaughter, Marina. My heart dropped. What happened? She fainted during gym class. Her blood pressure is very low. She's awake now, but she asked us to call you instead of her parents. I didn't even think. 10 minutes later, I was out the door, coat half-zipped, keys shaking in my hand. The drive felt longer than usual, the streets blurred by falling snow and panic. When I arrived at the school infirmary, Marina was sitting on a cot, her face pale and drawn. The nurse looked relieved. "She'll be fine, just needs rest and food." I knelt beside her. "Sweetheart, what happened?" She looked away. "I just got dizzy. It's nothing." But I could see the truth in her eyes, exhaustion, fear, maybe even hunger. I remembered the last time I'd seen her. She'd been quiet, withdrawn, and I had assumed it was teenage moodiness. Now, guilt twisted in my chest. The nurse handed me a clipboard. "We recommend she go home and eat something substantial. She said she wanted to stay with you." Marina's voice was barely a whisper. "Please, Grandma, just for tonight." End quote. "Of course," I said. As we left, I noticed how light she felt when I put my arm around her shoulders. Too light. At home, I made her a grilled cheese sandwich and tomato soup, her childhood favorite. She ate in silence at first, then slowly, the color returned to her face. When she finished, she pushed the bowl away and murmured, "Mom's gonna freak out." "She'll understand," I said, though I wasn't sure. After dinner, I tucked her into the guest room with extra blankets. When she finally fell asleep, I stood in the doorway for a long time, watching the steady rise and fall of her breathing. For a moment, I let myself feel the warmth of being needed again. The next morning, I called Vanessa. She answered on the third ring. "What do you want?" Her tone was sharp, defensive. "Marina's with me," I said calmly. "She fainted at school yesterday. The nurse called me because she asked for me." A long pause. Then, "What are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything. I'm telling you she needs rest and food. Maybe you should come by tonight. We can talk." "I don't need your lectures on parenting, Mother," she hissed. "You made your point when you abandoned us financially." "This isn't about money," I said quietly. "It's about your daughter." There was silence on the other end. Then a sigh. "Fine. We'll come tonight." End quote. Tension his may crime. When she hung up, I leaned against the counter and closed my eyes. My stomach was tight with unease. The reunion was inevitable, but I didn't know what kind of storm was coming through my door this time. By 7 that evening, the doorbell rang. Vanessa stood there, looking exhausted beneath her perfect makeup. Rob followed, his tie loosened, his expression unreadable. Behind them was Lucas, slouching, headphones around his neck. I welcomed them in, trying to keep my tone neutral. The house smelled of roasted chicken and herbs, the kind of meal that once brought us together. Marina came down the stairs slowly, wearing one of my sweaters. Her brother's face softened when he saw her. "Hey kid," he said quietly. At first, dinner was silent except for the sound of clinking forks. Then Vanessa set hers down with a sharp clatter. "So this is what we're doing now? You invite us over to show that you can feed our kids better than we can?" I took a deep breath. "We're here because Marina fainted, because she's been skipping meals." Vanessa's eyes flashed. "Don't you dare blame me for that. Things have been hard. The boutique isn't doing well. Rob's been stressed at work. We're all trying our best." Lucas looked up suddenly. "Mom, Grandma's right. You never stop talking about your shop, but there's barely any food at home." "Excuse me?" Vanessa turned to him, shocked. "It's true," he said. "You spend everything on that stupid store." Rob's voice was low but firm. "Lucas." "No, he's right," I said softly. "Vanessa, you're drowning and you're dragging your family with you." She glared at me. "You think I don't know that? You think I don't wake up every morning terrified the store will close? That I'll fail in front of everyone?" Her voice cracked on the last word. For a moment the room was quiet except for her uneven breathing. Then I said, "You don't have to do it alone." She laughed bitterly. "Oh, right. You'll swoop in with your money again, fix everything like before." "No," I said. "I'm not offering money. I'm offering to help you figure it out." As quired. She frowned. "I don't need your pity." "It's not pity. It's partnership." For the first time, she didn't respond with anger. She just stared at me, confusion flickering behind her tired eyes. Rob cleared his throat. "She's trying to help, Vanessa. Maybe it's time we stop pretending we can handle this on our own." Vanessa shot him a look, but her shoulders slumped. "I don't even know where to start," she whispered. "Start here," I said. "Eat, rest. Then tomorrow, we'll look at your finances together. Tears filled her eyes, but she blinked them away. You're not giving me money? No, I said. I'm giving you something better. A plan. She didn't say anything, but she didn't leave either. And that was enough. Dinner ended quietly. After everyone left, Marina hugged me tightly at the door. Thank you, Grandma. I kissed her forehead. For what? For not yelling. For helping Mom even when she doesn't deserve it. I smiled sadly. She's still my daughter. And one day, she'll remember how to be yours. When the house was quiet again, I cleaned up slowly, my mind heavy with thoughts. For the first time, Vanessa had cracked not with anger, but with fear. Maybe, just maybe, it was the first sign of change. As I turned off the kitchen lights, my phone buzzed on the counter. It was a message from Eleanor. How did it go? I typed back. Messy, painful, but maybe hopeful. A few seconds later, her reply came through. Good, because hope is always the first thing that dies before the truth is born. I stared at the words, uneasy. Outside, wind rattled the windows, and the snow began to fall again, thicker this time, almost blinding. Something told me that this fragile peace wouldn't last. The morning after that dinner, the house still carried the echo of last night's voices. The arguments, the trembling apologies, the silence that followed. I walked through the kitchen, touching the edge of the table where Vanessa had sat. The air still held the faint smell of roasted chicken and tension. I wasn't sure what would come next, but I knew something had shifted. A wall had cracked. Maybe not enough to let in the light completely, but enough to let hope breathe. 2 days later, Vanessa called. Her voice was softer this time. Mom? She said hesitantly. Can we talk? When she arrived, she looked different. No designer outfit, no heavy makeup, just jeans and a gray sweater. She sat at the same table, hands clasped together like a child waiting for judgment. I looked over the numbers last night, she began. You were right. The store is a mess. I've been overspending for months. I thought things would turn around if I just pushed harder. I nodded. That's not unusual. Most businesses struggle in the beginning. Her shoulders sagged. It's not just the store. It's me. I don't know how to manage anything without money. I thought if I looked successful, people would believe I was. I leaned back, studying her face. For the first time in years, she looked vulnerable, not angry, not defensive, just human. Vanessa, I said quietly, you've been trying to prove your worth to everyone but yourself. She gave a shaky laugh. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, but it's possible. We spent the rest of the afternoon going through her finances. Receipts, invoices, rent payments. It was chaos, but chaos could be sorted. I taught her how to track expenses, how to cut losses, how to identify what mattered most. It wasn't about saving the store anymore. It was about saving herself. By the end of the day, she looked exhausted but lighter. I can't believe I never learned any of this. You didn't need to, I said gently, because I never made you. It's graded. She looked at me, eyes wide, realizing the weight of that truth. You always fixed everything. And I thought that was love, I admitted. But real love doesn't remove responsibility. It shares it. For the first time, she smiled without bitterness. You're a better teacher than I gave you credit for. And you're a faster learner than you think. The next few weeks settled into a rhythm I hadn't known in years. Vanessa came by almost every morning. We worked side by side at the kitchen table, spreading out receipts and plans. Rob joined us on weekends, helping with numbers while Lucas and Marina studied in the next room. The house was alive again, not with chaos, but with purpose. Slowly, I saw the old Vanessa fade, replaced by someone new, determined, curious, humble. There were still moments of frustration, of course. Once, she threw a calculator across the table and groaned. I can design clothes all day, but spreadsheets make me want to cry. I laughed softly. That's why pencils have erasers. Mistakes mean you're trying. She laughed too, and for a brief second, I saw the little girl I had adopted all those years ago, the one with wide, hopeful eyes who wanted to be loved. One afternoon, after hours of sorting, she leaned back and said, You know, I used to think you helped me because you pitied me. I never pitied you, I said. I admired you. You had strength even when you didn't see it. She blinked back tears. I was awful to you, wasn't I? I reached across the table and took her hand. You were hurt, and hurt people hurt others, but now you're healing. That night, after she left, I sat by the fire with a cup of tea. The house was quiet again, but the silence felt warm this time. I thought of Eleanor and the promise I had made. It wasn't about inheritance anymore. It was about transformation. The next morning, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Michael standing there, holding 2 cups of coffee. Peace offering, he said. I smiled. You finally learned my order. He grinned faintly. Vanessa told me you've been helping with the store. I'm mentoring her, I said carefully. He nodded. She seems different, calmer. She's learning what real independence feels like. He hesitated, then said, maybe I need that lesson too. We talked for hours, not about money or problems, but about life. He told me about his company, his stress, his fear of failing as a son and a father. For the first time, he wasn't the polished businessman. He was my son again. When he left, he hugged me a real hug, not the half-hearted kind people give out of habit. Thanks, Mom, he said softly. For what? For still being here. After he drove away, I felt tears sting my eyes. Eleanor had been right. The real test wasn't about money. It was about teaching them and myself how to rebuild connection without conditions. Days turned into weeks. The boutique started to stabilize. Vanessa moved to a smaller space, cut expenses, and began teaching sewing workshops for local teenagers. Rob found balance between work and home. Even Lucas seemed happier, less restless. One evening, as we were closing the books for the month, Vanessa looked up and said, You know, I used to think you loved Michael more than me. I froze. Why would you think that? Because you never yelled at him. You only yelled at me. I smiled sadly. That's because I knew you could handle it. You were strong even when you didn't feel it. She nodded slowly, her eyes shining. I think I finally understand you now. For a long moment, we sat in silence, the kind that feels like peace. But peace rarely lasts forever. The next day, I received a call from Eleanor's lawyer. His tone was formal, almost hesitant. Mrs. Whitmore, he said, I'm afraid it's about Eleanor. You should come to Chicago as soon as you can. My heart stopped. I gripped the edge of the counter. Is she? She's very weak, he said gently. She's been asking for you. The room around me blurred. I sat down, the phone pressed to my ear. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. Tell her I'm coming, I finally whispered. As I hung up, I looked around my quiet kitchen, the same space where my daughter had cried, where my grandchildren had eaten, where my son had forgiven me. And I knew the next chapter wasn't about them anymore. It was about saying goodbye to the woman who had taught me how to say no, and in doing so, had given me back my life. The flight to Chicago felt endless. The clouds below looked like soft pillows I could fall through, but my thoughts were anything but soft. Every mile closer to Eleanor made my chest tighten. I knew what I was flying toward. I just wasn't ready to face it. When I arrived at the hospital, the nurse led me down a quiet corridor. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and roses. Eleanor's private room was filled with light from a large window overlooking Lake Michigan. She looked smaller than I remembered. Her silver hair spread across the pillow like silk threads, but her eyes sharp, commanding, familiar, still held that same spark. There you are, she said, her voice hoarse but steady. You took your time. I laughed softly, though it caught in my throat. You know I'd come the moment you asked. Of course, she said, a faint smile curving her lips. You always keep your promises. I sat beside her and took her hand. It was cool and fragile, the skin almost translucent. How are you feeling? She shrugged slightly, like an old tree in winter, still standing but running out of leaves. Don't say that, I whispered. Maggie, she said gently. We both know I'm not getting out of here. The words hit hard, but there was no fear in her eyes, only peace. I wanted to see you, she continued, to make sure you were still holding the line. I am, I said. Vanessa's learning. She's finally standing on her own. Michael's coming around too. Things are better. Eleanor squeezed my hand weakly. You did it. You passed the test. It stopped being about the test a long time ago, I said. It's about my family. About me. Her smile deepened. Then you really understood the lesson. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the rhythmic beeping of the monitors. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and steady. It seemed Chicago refused to let go of winter. After a while, she spoke again. "Maggie, I have one more favor to ask. Anything. When I'm gone," she said. "Promise me you won't let them slip back into old habits. Not your children. Not yourself. Keep your boundaries. Keep your dignity. You're worth more than their approval." Tears burned behind my eyes. "I promise." Her hand tightened briefly in mine. "Good. Then I can rest." For the next week, I stayed in Chicago, visiting every day. We talked about everything: our husbands, our youth, the foolish things we once thought were important. Sometimes she was alert, sharp as ever. Other times, she drifted into memories, calling me by my maiden name, laughing about college parties from decades ago. One afternoon, she asked me to open the window. "I want to smell the lake," she said. "I want to feel alive a little longer." End quote. The wind swept in, cold and crisp, filling the room with the scent of snow and water. I sat beside her in silence, watching her eyes close as she breathed deeply. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked suddenly. "Regret what?" "Not having children." Eleanor's eyes opened slowly. "Sometimes," she said. "But then I remember, I had you." My throat tightened. "You're not dying yet," I said, half laughing, half crying. She smiled. "That's what they all say before the credits roll." The next morning, when I arrived, her bed was neatly made, and the nurse met me at the door with eyes full of sympathy. I didn't need to ask. I already knew. The funeral was quiet but elegant, just like her. White roses everywhere, the faint smell of her favorite perfume in the air. Her lawyer, Mr. Hastings, stood beside me, handing me an envelope. "She wanted you to have this personally," he said. I nodded, unable to speak. That night, back at my hotel, I opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter, her handwriting bold and graceful as always. "Maggie, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Don't grieve too long. The world doesn't stop for our pain, and neither should you. You've spent your life giving. Now, I want you to receive. The company, the properties, the accounts, they're yours. But remember, they're just tools. The real gift is freedom. You earned it the day you said no. With love, always, Eleanor." I pressed the letter to my chest and cried, not the sharp, broken sobs of grief, but the quiet, aching kind that comes from gratitude. When I returned to Boston, the house felt strange, too big, too still. Vanessa met me at the airport, her eyes red but full of genuine concern. She hugged me tightly. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Thank you," I said. On the drive home, we talked not about money or business, but about Eleanor, about life, about how easy it was to lose ourselves in what others expected. "I wish I could have met her," Vanessa said softly. "She would have liked you," I replied, "especially the new you." End quote. That night, after unpacking, I walked through the house touching the small reminders of my friend, the porcelain figurine she gave me on my 60th birthday, the scarf she knitted during her chemo treatments, the photo of us laughing with coffee cups in hand. She was everywhere. But so was her lesson. The next few days were a blur of legal paperwork and quiet mornings. Michael visited often, checking on me. He offered to help with the inheritance, but I told him I had it under control. "You don't have to do everything alone," he said. I smiled. "That's the irony, isn't it? I had to learn to be alone before you could see me as strong." He didn't argue. He just nodded. Then one morning, about a week after I returned, I received an official letter from Eleanor's lawyer. A formal meeting was scheduled in Boston for the reading of the will, not just for me, but for my entire family. That caught my attention. Why would she include them? I muttered to myself. The answer wasn't in the letter, but in my gut. Eleanor never did anything without purpose. I looked out the window at the late March snow melting on the garden. For the first time in months, I felt both peace and apprehension. Something was coming, and knowing Eleanor, it would be big. The day of the will reading arrived gray and cold, the kind of Boston morning where the sky hung low and the air smelled faintly of salt and snow. I dressed carefully, not in morning black but in soft gray, a color Eleanor used to say was the shade of strength. When I arrived at the law office downtown, my family was already there. Vanessa sat stiffly in a tailored coat, Rob beside her, tapping his foot. Michael leaned against the window, pretending to scroll through his phone but glancing at me every few seconds. Lucas and Marina sat quietly in the corner, their faces uncertain, sensing the gravity of something bigger than they could understand. Mr. Hastings, Eleanor's longtime lawyer, entered the room with a folder pressed against his chest. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, nodding to me. "Thank you for coming. Mrs. Campbell left specific instructions that this meeting include your entire family." Vanessa frowned. "Why us? We barely knew her." Mr. Hastings gave a polite but knowing smile. "You'll see." He pressed a button on a small remote, and a large screen lit up behind him. There, in perfect clarity, appeared Eleanor alive, elegant, and commanding, sitting in the garden of her Chicago home. "If you're watching this," her voice began, "I'm gone. But don't look so grim. Death is just another business meeting with better catering. It's not a fondlate. Even in death, she could still make me laugh," she continued, her eyes steady. "Over the past months, I've watched a family rediscover what love looks like when it's not tied to money. I've seen Maggie choose dignity over comfort, truth over silence, but I've also seen how easily love can twist when entitlement takes its place." Vanessa shifted uncomfortably. Michael looked down at the floor. "This message," Eleanor said, "isn't just for Maggie, it's for all of you." She leaned slightly forward. "Vanessa, you're brilliant, passionate, and strong-willed, but pride has been your greatest enemy. Michael, you're loyal and intelligent, but too afraid of emotional mess to be truly close to anyone. You both love your mother, but you've forgotten how to show it." Her words were like gentle blows, not cruel, but impossible to ignore. She paused, then smiled. "So I'm going to help you remember." The lawyer handed me another envelope, this one sealed with Eleanor's initials. Inside were several documents. Mr. Hastings explained. Per her instructions, all of Mrs. Campbell's assets valued at approximately $120 million are to be transferred to you, Mrs. Whitmore, as the primary heir. Gasps filled the room. Vanessa's hand shot to her mouth. Michael turned pale. "But," Mr. Hastings added, "Mrs. Campbell set aside conditional trusts for each of your family members." Vanessa straightened. "Conditional?" He nodded. "Yes. Vanessa, you are to receive a trust of $5 million, but only after you complete 5 years of verified work for a registered nonprofit organization, earning no more than the standard salary of that position." Vanessa's face turned red. "What? That's absurd. She can't." "She can," the lawyer interrupted calmly. "And she did," he continued, turning to Michael. "You, Mr. Whitmore, will receive the same contingent upon 3 years of employment as a teacher at a public school." Michael blinked in disbelief. "A teacher?" End quote. "Yes," said Mr. Hastings, "preferably in a district where students need role models, not investors." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Finally, the lawyer looked at me. "As for you, Mrs. Whitmore, you are granted full authority to oversee their progress and to release the funds once the conditions are met. You also have the right to revoke them entirely if they fail." I looked around the room. Vanessa's anger had faded into shock. Michael's expression was unreadable. Eleanor's voice continued from the screen. "Maggie, I trusted you to see this through because you understand what I understood too late, that love without accountability is just control wearing perfume. It's not bad." Then she smiled, softer now. "My dear friend, you passed your test. Let's see if they can pass theirs." The screen went black. For a long time, no one spoke. Finally, Vanessa whispered, "She hated me." "No," I said quietly. "She saw you. And maybe for the first time, she made sure you'd see yourself too." Michael rubbed his temples. "So what happens now?" "That's up to you," I said. "You can fight it, or you can earn it." Rob cleared his throat. "Maybe this isn't such a bad thing. It's structure." Vanessa glared at him. "Easy for you to say." But then she looked down at her hands, her voice trembling. Maybe she was right. I've spent my life taking shortcuts. End quote. Marina reached over and squeezed her mother's hand. "You'll be great at it, Mom. You're good with people." Vanessa blinked, surprised by her daughter's faith. "Maybe." Michael stood and looked at me. "Do you think I can actually do this?" I smiled. "You've been teaching your whole life. You just never noticed." He laughed softly, shaking his head. "God, Mom, you sound like Eleanor." "I'll take that as a compliment." Weeks turned into months, and slowly, unbelievably, they began to change. Vanessa joined a nonprofit that taught sewing and fashion design to low-income teens. At first, she hated it, the long hours, the lack of recognition, but little by little, it broke down her walls. The kids adored her. They called her Miss V, and for the first time, she was needed not for money, but for who she was. Michael started teaching math at a local high school. He called me after his first week, voice buzzing with disbelief. "They actually listened to me, Mom." "Well, some of them." I laughed. "Now you know how I felt when I taught." As the months passed, both of them grew lighter, humbler, more grounded. And as they changed, so did our family. We spent weekends together again, no tension, no transactions, just laughter, food, and real conversations. On my 70th birthday, they surprised me with a handmade photo album. Each page showed their new lives: Vanessa with her students, Michael in his classroom, Lucas helping with charity events, Marina painting with me in my studio. On the last page was a letter from Vanessa. "Mom, thank you for forcing me to grow, for teaching me that love isn't about what we take, but what we become because of it. I used to think your no was rejection. Now I know it was love in disguise." I closed the book, tears blurring my vision. For a long moment, I just sat there, breathing it in. Out the window, the sun dipped behind the Boston skyline, turning the snow gold. I lifted my glass and whispered, "Well played, Eleanor. You did it." The speeding inexperience. And maybe that was the real inheritance, not the money, not the houses, but the reminder that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's just a mother saying no, and meaning it. So, if you're listening to this story, remember this: you are not selfish for choosing peace. You are not cruel for setting boundaries. Sometimes love requires distance before it can return home. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear that saying no can be the most loving word of all. Because love, real love, always begins with respect.